Yeah.
It's always hard to be the first one, isn't it?
If you're using someone else's stem cells, isn't there a risk of rejection in using those as presence?
So when it comes to embryonic stem cells and fetal stem cells and a donor stem cells, then yes, there is a risk that you'll just reject the cells. But when it comes to mesenchymal stem cells, they actually are thought not to be immunoreactive. So I suppose one of the great difficulties in a lot of these proposed treatments is that there's no verification about what was in the tube that was injected into them as well. So we don't know really what was even there.
Other questions?
In your opinion, Megan, are we looking at different... Sorry? Oh, sorry. Sorry, Megan, in your opinion, are we looking at is it better? No?
I can repeat the question.
Better?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. In your opinion, are we looking at numerous types of stem cells potentially that may be needed for one treatment on one individual with MND?
No, what I think what we're going to see is numerous types of stem cells tested for MND, and there will be something that will work better than the others. But I think at this stage it comes back to that, fast car, which car is a lemon and which car is going to be the fast car that you want to keep. You'll only do that through rigorous testing. So I think the other point I want to raise though is that maybe a different type of stem cell will be different in different conditions. So perhaps it will be being able to protect the endogenous neurons in people with MND to stop further progress of the condition. Whereas in macular degeneration, perhaps it will be these cells derived from embryonic stem cells that will be able to be effective. So it might be different cell populations for different applications. So not sort of one, and I suppose that's another point to raise about these clinics that are offering these unproven treatments, is often they're offering the same type of stem cell treatment for 50 different conditions. And that doesn't make a lot of sense when you know that the different, behind every condition is a different pathology. So that this magic bullet makes me quite nervous.
So that's right, Megan. If a couple produce too many embryos and one successfully fertilises and goes on, the couple has got to say what has to happen with the remaining ones, yeah?
Yeah, so sorry, I keep forgetting to repeat the question for the recorder. But in the case of excess embryos for infertility treatment, it's usually when you've got more than that, because most couples want more than one child. But once they have had the number of children that they wish through IVF, if they still have embryos frozen, then yes, that's a decision they have to make. Do they donate them to research? Do they donate them to another couple, or do they discard them? And of course, donating them to another couple would mean if they have successfully achieved 2 pregnancies and have 2 children, if that embryo that they donate is able to form another pregnancy, the child that develops will be a full genetic sibling to their children.
Yeah.
So it's a very and it does happen. People are willing to altruistically donate their embryos to other couples, but I don't think it's a simple choice.
Yeah, because I was thinking about, well, I'm sort of pro-life, and what the pro-life movement said, it's sort of like killing an embryo due to research. But then it's not a simple thing saying you're killing an embryo. I'm thinking about that. I'm just thinking that, okay, some couples might not mind another infertile couple getting a donation of one, but some couples might not want it.
That's right, and I think I would probably say that for couples who are uncomfortable about those decisions, maybe infertility treatment is a step too far as well. Creating an embryo, even with the intent to achieve a pregnancy, would be a tough decision for some couples who really believe that fertilised egg is equivalent to a 2-week-old baby. That there's no difference. That every fertilised egg because it has the potential to be a baby, is a baby. And so therefore you can understand that the use of what I described on a week-old embryo is the equivalent of murder. Having handled many thousands of embryos in my IVF days, I see an embryo as having the potential to be alive, but a life not yet realised. And what I often think about is if I'm culturing a flask of skin cells and I drop it, I'm annoyed because I wasted my experiment and had to do it again. But if I drop a tray of embryos for a couple, I don't feel like I've killed anything, but I feel obviously concerned and very concerned for the couple that I've taken away that potential for them, that I've interfered, prolonged their infertility. So that's how I've always rationalised it. But I think we all have to make a decision, and I think it will be interesting if there are clinical trials that are successful with cells using embryonic stem cells for perhaps like macular degeneration or diabetes. That will be a conscientious sort of decision that people will have to make, whether they're comfortable with where that material came from.
In the 16 people that you've studied, did you find that the ones that have gone overseas and had the treatment, and it may have dampened it, as you've said, but after a time when you've come back here, then it comes back and it seems to advance?
So, thank you. So this is a question around our investigation into people's experiences and when they've gone overseas for treatment. And what we saw was that not everybody had a physical improvement. Sometimes they just felt better. So they felt like it was something, they were also trying lots of different things, I have to say. It wasn't just stem cells, they were having different types of physiotherapy, maybe some herbal remedies. So they were just trying lots of different things. And even though some of them didn't necessarily have any physical improvement, they felt better. For those who did have a physical improvement and then went back further times, and some of the people we interviewed had been 3 or 4 times, one family I think spent sort of 16 months in India, they didn't necessarily see an improvement after the first. So that's the only way I can answer that question. I think for a lot of people, the sheer fact of being able to do something when conventional medicine's told you, sorry, there's nothing else we can do, can be quite liberating initially. And I know in one case with a young man with spinal cord injury, he didn't believe he could travel after his injury, and he found it wasn't as arduous as he thought and was really looking forward to travelling. So that was for him a great benefit.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to touch on cord blood that was raised, the question that was raised earlier this morning. I suppose I want to echo David's comments that cord blood banking is particularly public banking, where you can donate the cord blood, is a fantastic gift because those cells can be used in a matched situation to young children or even to adults now who've got life-threatening illnesses of the blood and immune system. Extrapolating that out, can we use those cord bloods to treat MND, Parkinson's, other conditions? The jury's still out whether those cells will be effective. And the jury's really out whether you'll need a match sample anyway. So back to the question that you raised a moment ago around matching. So it only costs, I think, $3,000 to have the cord blood banked, collected, processed and banked privately. So for some couples, some families, perhaps that's not a lot of money. For others it is. And I think that has to be consideration. And I just want to make sure that people who bank their cord blood privately understand that they're not necessarily buying insurance. It's not so simple. So I think some of the marketing is quite aggressive with cord blood banking, and it's as though if you don't do this for your child, you're letting them down. But I think there was an article in the weekend paper last weekend around worrying the well, and I wonder whether this is a symptom of that to some extent. So we don't know where the research will be in 20 or 40 years, but I don't necessarily think you need to invest there yet.
I just had a question about, we often hear people considering travelling or going overseas, and what do people need to consider before deciding to go overseas, or even within Australia, to have treatment?
Yeah. So thank you very much. So I think the first thing you have to do is get the facts, find out what the provider is offering, grill them about success rate and value rate in terms of complications from the process. Ask about how the cells are collected, what's the donor, who's the donor, has there been ethical approval, and find out how they're being put back. I was surprised in our small sample study, almost everybody had the cells delivered back into fluid surrounding their spinal column, so like a lumbar puncture. And I was surprised how people were dismissive and thought that that was really quite a common practice. Now, the idea of putting something foreign into my spinal column makes me concerned. And then there's a lot of risk of infection. So I think the questions you have to ask are around where do the cells come from, what proof and evidence exists already for the treatment, and whether there's any kind of clinical trial that's going to be done. Is your participation going to be valuable to the community? Are we going to learn from that experience? So I just wanted to put up, there's a couple of booklets that are quite helpful. One published by the Australian Stem Cell Centre, which is where I used to work, and another one by the International Society of Stem Cell Research. And within these booklets there's some great background information about stem cells and also some questions about things that you can ask. But I think fundamentally it's not enough just to have a patient testimonial, somebody who says it worked for them, because your condition might be quite different to theirs, and it's not necessarily a matter of just saying what happens for somebody will work for me. So I think gather the information and talk to your neurologist about you and what's best for you.
Okay, well, got another question?
Is there a general banking for cord blood cells? Like millions of babies, lots of babies are born every day. Is it collected from the hospital or anything like that?
So there's private banking that you can pay for, and they have quite an extensive network around Australia. But there's a well-established public bank, and the public bank is linked up not only around Australia, between different states in Australia, but also internationally. So it means if there's a sick child in Tasmania with a difficult match, they can search not only the databases in Australia but also overseas for a match. However, not everybody, when they have a baby, can donate. And what's it called? Just trying the inner wheel that are associated with Rotary. So they're often the wives of members of Rotary. These ladies do a fantastic job raising money annually to support public cord blood banking, and it's also supported obviously with state and federal government funding. But the real bottleneck there is not enough collection sisters, so women or people to collect the blood. That's the rate limiting step. So I know when I had my babies, I couldn't donate the cord blood. There was no one to donate it at the hospital either to pre-process it. But having said that, if there is a lot of support, and we have a fantastic bank of cells that can be used for treatments now.
I thought there was only one collection place in Sydney for public banking.
I know there's one processing place that holds them, but I think there's multiple collecting places. I'm not sure in Sydney. Being from Melbourne, I know that there's about 4 main hospitals in Melbourne where you can donate your blood, the child's blood. But I know I went to one of the biggest ones, the private hospitals, and you can't do it.
If you was to donate yourself, take the stem cells and give them back, you'd have to give them back to the same person, wouldn't you? Otherwise you get rejection.
So this is a question around the
MND.
MND.
Yeah.
So stem cell treatments for MND and the concern around rejection.
Yes.
And I think just as we were talking about before, just like any organ or cellular exchange, transplant, you need to make sure that the cells aren't going to be rejected by the body. So that would mean either they have to be matched or the patient has to receive long-term immunotherapy, some stem cells, like these mesenchymal stem cells that are in the bone marrow and in cord blood, they aren't rejected. They don't have those surface markers, so the body doesn't recognise them as foreign, or at least that's what the theory is at the moment. So there are some types of stem cells that you wouldn't have to have matched, but most of them you would.
On that note, I'd like to thank Megan for being so generous with her time and coming up to Sydney to speak with us today and to, I guess, give us more information about what does it mean by stem cell research and stem cell treatment. So thank you very much, and just a small token of our